As she said, I'm Mary Ontiveros, and she said that I have been here for decades. Yeah, I've been here for decades. If you count my student years, it's I think I'm into 46 or 47 years, so that's a long time, right? And I was very involved in student government here. I was a vice president for the way the structure was for ASCSU. I was vice president for student affairs, and I've been involved in a whole lot of committees, all aimed at trying to change the climate, or at least address the climate here at Colorado State University. And so I feel that I came to this job as a VP for diversity, and then this process of conducting a campus climate survey with an understanding of where the campus was, right? I knew that there were lots of issues, because those issues are issues that either had come to my attention through those many, many years, or issues that I had experienced on this campus. When I came as a freshman, you could count on a couple hands the number of Latino students, for example, who had come not through a quote-unquote special program. And over the years, we've learned how to recruit diverse students. And so I had heard all of these kinds of things. But all of that was anecdotal, right? It was just information that was being shared with me, or again, some experiences. But when you're having to talk to faculty and talk to staff or talk to policymakers about what the campus is like, I can't just go and say, this was my experience, my personal experience. I mean, that counts for a little bit, but not a whole lot. Or I couldn't just say that I've spoken to X number of students. Again, it's just the stories of a few. They're important, and I don't want to discount that, but faculty want to know more than that. They want to know numbers. Some of the anecdotal behavior, or those stories, related not just to faculty, but also to staff and students, and also to guests, people who came to visit the campus, and the kinds of things that they were doing and saying. And so we thought, well, we need to change this. One of the first things that was done with the creation of this position was to define what diversity was. Many years ago, we defined diversity very, very narrowly, and it was basically race or ethnicity. And then gender was added to that. Sexual orientation was then added. Well, right now, our definition of diversity at Colorado State includes many, many dimensions, about 17 of them, in fact, including age, culture, ideas and perspectives, disability, ethnicity, first-generation status, familial status, which is really very important because we have students coming from foster care situations, gender identity and expression, geographic background, marital status, national origin, race, religious and spiritual beliefs, sex, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, veteran status. So in listing those, how many of you could raise your hand to say that you were in one of those categories? Just about everybody. So as a result of that, coming up with a campus climate survey that was going to address diversity was really coming up with a campus climate survey that was going to address the needs of everybody on campus, right? So we needed to have an assessment. We knew that. And we needed a committee that was going to understand this issue, and that's when we created the assessment group for diversity issues. And it is a great collaboration between Laura's office, institutional research. We had somebody from training and organizational development, from the retention office, the assessment office for the Division of Student Affairs. We had the individual who was responsible for the accreditation of the institution. So we had a number of different people who were on that committee. And we began the process of deciding, okay, how do we begin to launch this survey? And I think it's fair to say that we made mistakes. In fact, I think it's fair to say we made quite a number of mistakes. We needed to decide, what kind of survey we were going to use. There are campus climate surveys out there. There are surveys related to the work environment. And one of the nice things about those other surveys is that you can compare how you are doing at your institution with other institutions that are taking those same surveys, right? And we looked at quite a number of them. And we decided that they were really addressing work at a level that didn't really focus on diversity. You know, that issues related to what happens at work based on me as an individual, as a person of color, or as a woman, or whatever, that they weren't really addressing those as much as we wanted to have that done. So we decided that we were going to create our own survey. And I think to this day that is still a very good decision. And I've gone to some professional conferences where they're talking about developing campus climate surveys. And our hope is that at some point we will nail this to the point that other institutions will adopt our survey. And then if they administer it, then we can make comparisons. Although I also understand and strongly believe that it's not perhaps the best to compare us with other institutions because we are a unique institution, right? We're a land grant, sure, we have that in common with others, but we are unique insofar as we're not super close to a large metropolitan area. You know, our history is a little bit different, our culture is a little bit different. So having our own survey, I think, certainly in the short term, and I believe in the long term, is still the best thing that we could have done. We wanted to be inclusive in our survey. We wanted to make sure that we were including all these different populations, right? And we also wanted to make sure that we weren't repeating mistakes of the past. Well, one of the mistakes that had been made, Colorado State University had administered a campus climate survey about 10 years before our first one went out, which was in 2012. And what we learned is that the university received some really bad results. That people who took the survey were very honest about their feelings about the institution and its role in working with diverse populations, and it wasn't very good. So instead of sharing that with everyone and then moving forward to change that, the results of the survey were suppressed. And people didn't find out about it. I mean, we knew it had taken place, and everybody would always ask at these different committees, what happened to the survey? It had been analyzed. It was out there somewhere. It had just fallen into a hole someplace. So we had to decide, what are we going to do with our survey? And it was really fabulous because everybody on the committee decided that we have to be as transparent as possible. We're not going to make changes if people don't know what we're trying to change, right? And we need to be able to share all the information that we learn. There are some pros and cons to that. Some people said, but if you share it, then other institutions will know about Colorado State and they may judge our institution based on that. And then others said, but if people don't know what we're trying to change, they're never going to adjust their behavior. So our feeling was that we needed to accept and in fact embrace transparency. And so if you look on the diversity website, you will find all of the information related to the Campus Climate Survey for 2012, 2014, and it has as much information as IR can possibly provide to us based on the analysis. There's an executive summary. There's lots of numbers, so if you wanted to compare the numbers. So all of that information is out there. So we said we're going to be transparent. We also realized, of course, and this made sense, that by not sharing the information that was obtained in that survey 10 years before, some people were very reluctant to fill out this survey because they said, why bother, right? We did this before, nothing happened with it, and we don't even know what the results were. So why should we bother to fill out a survey for you all when you never bothered to give us information? And that became an issue, and I think it is still an issue that we are having to deal with. We also learned that there had been some concerns related to surveys in the past, not the Campus Climate Survey, the broad one, but campus climate surveys or climate surveys that had been administered within departments. And I think you all have probably had many discussions related to confidentiality and how important that is. Well, we had learned that in at least one college, a survey had been administered, and because the numbers are small, it was easy to identify who had answered what, and that information was shared. Now, the name wasn't given, but everybody knew who had answered what question when they shared the results in a particular way. And some people said, I will never fill out a campus climate survey again, ever. And we knew that particular colleges were the colleges that we were really wanting to get information about, but those were the colleges where faculty members or staff had been burned by having filled out a survey before. So past behaviors really impact what happens in the future. I mean, memories are very long, and if somebody has been injured in some way, that story spreads, just like wildfire. So it's very, very important to protect the integrity of your results, the integrity of all of the conversations. And so we have tried very, very hard to make sure that what had happened in the past was not repeated. We were, as I mentioned, interested in being inclusive in the development of our survey. And this is when we started to learn about what I call the politics of surveying. And I thought, okay, we're going to survey the campus. That shouldn't be so difficult. Well, that's when it became clear that different people felt that they were, quote unquote, responsible for particular populations on campus. And I'll give you an example of this, and it's an example of, this wasn't what came to my attention, but I think it serves as an example. If you're talking about the faculty and you want to survey the faculty, well, Rick Miranda, as the provost, is responsible for the faculty, right? And he wants to make sure that anything that goes out to faculty is cleared and all of that. And so you can't just go and say, I'm going to survey the faculty, I'm going to survey all AP staff, I'm going to survey all classified staff, I'm just going to administer this big thing. People immediately said, oh, well, what are you going to ask them, and how's this going to work, and when are you going to do it, and how can I be involved, and all of those things started happening. So we found that different groups were very interested in protecting is not the right word, that's perhaps too strong, but just making sure that they were watching out for what's happening with different populations. So instead, I went to, I spoke with the vice presidents in charge of particular populations, and then I went to the councils, like AP Council, Administrative Professional Council, and Classified Staff Council. I went to Extension. We talked about adjunct faculty members, and talked to people who may have administered surveys in the past to these populations. And what we found was people were really excited about the fact that we were going to be doing this. And they wanted us to ask questions on their behalf as well. So suddenly, our survey went from X number of questions that we thought were addressing the issues we wanted to address to all kinds of questions. I mean, a lot of questions. AP Council submitted some, CP Council, the group that was working on the commitment to CSU, they wanted to ask questions about whether that program was working. People who were adjunct faculty wanted to ask particular questions about governance. I mean, everybody wanted to ask questions. So we ended up with this monstrous survey. And we didn't say no to anybody. Mistake. At some point, you need to be able to say no. Yeah. It was amazing. And so we called on somebody in the psychology department. Her name is Dr. Byrne, Zinta Byrne. She is now the individual who is heading up the project to evaluate course evaluations. And she helped to save us, I think it's fair to say. And she helped us to take all of those questions and put them into a survey, an instrument that really was going to make sense. And so that's what we did. And we had to say no and tell people we can ask one question related to what you want, but we can't ask all of your questions. So we all compromised. And we came up with the survey, and that was back in 2012. And we were looking at particular items. One, these are as they relate to the individual. Are they valued? Are you valued as an employee at Colorado State? And do you feel that you are appreciated? And how does that look? We asked questions related to diversity and the kinds of efforts on campus that, or in your department that were happening related to diversity, whether it was recruitment or training programs or anything like that. We asked questions related to voice. Do you feel you have a voice? Is anybody listening to you? Does anybody really care about your concerns? Do you feel you have a voice? Professional development, was that available to people? Colleagues and coworkers, how do you get along with your colleagues and coworkers? Supervisor performance, we wanted to know how is your supervisor? And does your supervisor help you navigate through your daily work life? Benefits and resources, we asked about personal safety, and that issue is trying to get to things that are happening with women on campus, for example. Accessibility, trying to address some issues related to disabled folks. Harassment, we asked questions related to that. And then we also asked who would like to participate in a focus group. And we had, I think that year, about 160 people who said, yes, I want to be a part of a focus group. And it was really a good thing to do, because in terms of having voice, people wanted a place to be able to talk about their experience at Colorado State. We also learned that once we received all the results, that we cannot interpret the results on our own. So we went back to all of those groups that said that they wanted questions asked. We found, for example, that in some situations, faculty members rated very low in an area, or in another area, classified staff rated very, very poorly. And so we wanted to find out from classified staff, why do you think this is? Why do you think that happened? What do you think this reflects? Instead of me or our committee saying, classified staff feel rated this low because of. I think we had a pretty good idea. But to be able to go back to those populations so that they could feel that they were part of the process, I think is really, really made a difference. And I think that's something I would strongly recommend.
I think it also helped to alleviate some of the frustration and even anger that we came up against when we first started looking at doing the survey, when the results from the previous survey hadn't been shared. So for us to go back and ask for input before the results were made public, go ask for feedback and a collaborative interpretation of the results, I think really helps to dissipate a lot of that anger. And in the end, because no process is perfect, I think it also helps people to overlook other mistakes that we made with the knowledge that we were really doing the best that we really could. Because as you design a survey, it's sort of a feel as you go kind of thing. You design the survey, ideally we would have piloted it, checked the psychometrics, done all of that, and there just wasn't time or capacity to do that, so we designed the survey. It was a census-style survey, so we looked at all employees, and then we get the feedback, and that's when we start looking at questions and thinking, oh, I thought we worded that good, but I don't think we did, the results were really fun. And people were able to then overlook that because we had gone back to them and really asked for a true collaborative spirit in the interpretation.
Yeah, we also were very careful about making sure that the survey was translated into Spanish in this situation, because we have populations of folks working in, I think there are 3 primary areas on campus where people may not have access to a computer, for one thing, and may not speak fluently in English. So it was translated into Spanish, and then we made sure that there were paper copies available to folks. And people responded to that. I mean, we received responses in Spanish that then had to be translated, in order to do the analysis. But it was really great going back, and people had definite opinions about what was happening. And 2012 also was a time when people had not received a pay increase for a couple years in a row, and people were not happy about that. And it was great to be able to hear people voice that, because that showed up in the results big time. But people were able to say, it's not that we're not getting pay increases is just not that, but we're also not getting these other kinds of things, and so that commitment to Colorado became very important because the university was trying to recognize they can't give pay increases, but we can give tickets to a football game, or we can give tickets to a volleyball game or something like that. So going back out is really important. And people like the people working in extension, it was really important for them because I'm sure you probably all know that as a land-grant university, we have people working in all counties across the state of Colorado. And they are CSU employees, but they often feel that nobody cares about them, that their issues are somebody else's issues. So we made sure that we had questions related to extension, and then was also the Forest Service. So we have a lot of people working throughout the entire state. And prior to the survey, they always said, we're shocked that you even asked. We didn't even know you cared about us. So it was good to go through that process. Most importantly, though, as I mentioned with the focus groups, is that people felt that they had a voice, that they were able to share information with someone. And even in this part of the process, I made sure that we hired somebody from the outside to help with this, someone who had worked once upon a time with institutional research. And I didn't get involved with who was coming in. I cannot tell you to this day exactly who that person spoke to. She did the analysis, she reported out for us. I didn't want people to say, well, yeah, Mary knows exactly who said what. So we were very, very careful throughout the entire process and continue to be. But we learned that people were very vocal about, guess what, the stadium. It came up a couple times, even back then. The stadium definitely was an issue. Not getting pay increases was a huge issue. But people said they loved working at Colorado State. And the number one reason that they loved working at Colorado State, what would you guess? The people, but more specifically, the students. They loved being around students, and they liked that quite a bit. The number one program, they described it as a program that they liked, was Tony's email messages. They said, we love his email messages. And they said, for a number of reasons. One, he doesn't dumb down. What he sends, he's sending to the faculty, he's sending to the custodial staff, and he's not changing the message for one population over another. He doesn't dumb down to folks. And he shares the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Some people said they would prefer the Cliff Notes version, but they really liked the fact that he was sending it. They liked everybody hearing the same thing, and they felt that they got to know who he was. If you were to ask people on campus, tell us 3 things about Tony Frank that you're probably not going to read anywhere else. That he's a Cubs fan, he absolutely adores Abraham Lincoln, right? And so what's another Tonyism? The fact that he signs his name with a lowercase t, right? I mean, so people were able to chat about Tony Frank, and they said, we believe that he's genuine, and we really like that. I wish my department chair was the same. And those were the things that came after the I Love Tony Frank business. And they said, we wish our department chairs, or we wish our bosses, or whatever, would do the same thing. Now, they're not saying that they want to receive a lengthy email message from their department chair and the provost and on and on. What they were saying is, we want to be acknowledged the way Tony acknowledges us. Even if it's a hello, we want to be able to know that people recognize that we are here. So those are the kinds of things that we picked up quite a bit from that 2012 survey. And then in 2014, we wanted to take some of what we had learned from the 12 survey. For example, we learned that harassment was an issue on campus. At that point, I think it was 25% of the people who answered questions related to harassment had been harassed on this campus. 25%. I think
that question was one of our mistakes.
That's right. And that's why for the 2014, we said 25% is a huge number. To me, it's a huge number. Other people had said, Yeah, but 75% haven't. Duh. But yeah, 25% have. So,
But we didn't ask the question right.
yeah, we didn't.
We got the results back and realized that in the question, and we reread those questions for months. We thought they were
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
then the second you get it back, it's like when I wrote my dissertation and you get it bound and then you open it up and I found a typo on the very first page where I looked at.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. The second we got the results back, we realized that in the question where we asked, have you ever had experienced harassment on campus, it was, have you ever? And we have employees who have been here for decades. And that could have been, like my experience, one of the times that I experienced harassment was the first day I was here. So that question, I would have answered yes, but is that something that needs to be changed for me right now? Well, no, because that was as isolated as 10 years ago. So we didn't realize we needed time parameters on our questions and really to think about what worked backwards, what's the result that you want to be able to report on and work backwards from that when you're doing the survey design. And we, for the most part, we got that right with that question we designed.
We absolutely didn't. And then what does that mean? What,
Yeah, and we're like, well,
harassment, what did that mean exactly? And there were situations
did you
where,
define that?
yeah, where somebody might work in an office where they have a particular dress code that is stricter than the place that they go to next, right? So, or vice versa. They're working in an environment where you can wear flip-flops to work, for example. Then they go to another office where you can't, and they still are wearing flip-flops, and then they're told, I'm sorry, you cannot dress this way. Well, they may feel harassed. And is that the kind of harassment that we're talking about, where it's really a clarification of dress code? Or really, we were looking at harassment, right, sexual harassment in particular, but something that is more than whether somebody's adhering to the dress code. And so we thought, next time we do this, we're going to have to be more careful. And so we learned quite a bit from that first one. So the 2014, we wanted to address issues of commitment and their commitment to the institution. And also, it was interesting because the way we set it up, we were asking questions related to the institution and to the department. And what we found is that generally, the employees have great commitment to the institution, but to a lesser degree to the place they work, to the department. In the first survey, we also learned that there were quite a number of issues related to supervision, and that they felt that supervisors just were not trained. They didn't know the rules. They didn't know the rules and the distinction between a classified staff and an AP staff, and even what the rules were for faculty. So we wanted to get more into the supervisor's experience and the satisfaction with your supervisor and equitable treatment. Are you being treated equitably? And then discrimination and harassment experience, and we asked a whole lot of questions to try to really nail that down. Campus and departmental perceptions, personal and employee characteristic. So we really tried to nail down the harassment. We still found that the number was large. It's about 20%. About 20% of people who work on this campus feel that they have been harassed within the last year. Within the last year. That's a concern, right? And so we're trying to, I'll chat in a minute about some of the things that have happened as a result of these surveys, but that is definitely a concern. And we are still having to deal with issues such as fear of retribution for filling out the survey. All of those past things are still haunting us. We would love, in an ideal world, for a person to fill out the survey and simply put in their EID, right? If people would do that, then we would know a lot of demographic information. How long have you been on campus, and race, ethnicity, gender, where you work. Because believe it or not, there are people on this campus who don't know where they work. A lot of them who don't know where they work. And
So what department do you work for? At the time, I think you had 2 employees. And like 16 people said that they work for the Office of Diversity.
I know.
And you already thought that's funny. We have 2 employees.
Yeah.
But people thought their job
Was diversity.
Instead of their department was the college of ag, the department of
Yeah.
and then, because people were self-reporting really erroneous things like that, it called into question then the rest of the results that we were presenting. Because people didn't even know what department they worked in, how could they possibly know some of the other things that we were asking.
Yeah.
We didn't see that conflict. We thought that even if they didn't know exactly what department they worked in, or some of the demographic stuff like that wasn't right, they knew how they felt, they knew what they had experienced. But it called the results into question, particularly because as you present results on a campus, whether your population had included faculty or not, once you present those results on campus, you need to remember that faculty are trained in the art and science of questioning and doubting. And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be at the cutting edge of their discipline and question what we know and move us forward. That's a good thing. But it can also manifest in a lot of skepticism on campus when you present results. So you really need to, one, not take that personal, and two, be able to back the results and discuss why there might be discrepancies and any issues that you may have had in the administration or the design of the surveys that you're talking about. And just be very transparent and open about that.
And people also want to know, well, how about my department? And it's hard to compare when you know that there are mistakes in people reporting where they work. The other area that was really discrepant was research. Lots of people on this campus think they work for the vice president for research. And the VPR has, I don't know, 6 people or something like that. And yet there were many, because faculty who are doing a lot of research, they thought, oh yeah, I must be working for the vice president for research, instead of working for their college. So if we were able to just ask for an EID, then we would know all of this stuff without people having to worry about it. But people won't do that. And they won't do that because they're fearful that we would know who they are, and then we would report their answers to somebody else. So that fear is very, very real.
Very real. They were afraid that I was collecting IP addresses for people that filled it out and that I would somehow know who that was. So we actually had people report to me way after the fact that, oh yeah, I did that survey. I went and completed that at the library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they just didn't trust the process.
And I even had a OEO contact me because somebody had reported that they just lost their job because of information they filled out on the campus climate survey that was then revealed to their boss. That absolutely never
the results
happened.
that they were saying, actually only one person ever saw those results. Mary and I did not see the results. In fact, on purpose, we did not see the results because we didn't want anyone to be able to say anything like that. We never saw the file, we never saw anything. Only one person on the entire planet saw those results. And so the issue of confidentiality is really, really critical.
Yeah. You cannot be too careful. I mean, really, you just cannot be too careful. So then in the second survey, we also asked who wanted to be involved with focus groups. And this time, the number doubled. And doing focus groups for 250 people or so, that's a challenge. But we made a commitment, and so we hired somebody again, actually had to hire 2 people, and made arrangements for them to be able to say what was on their mind. And the focus group results this year, the way it was reported, was really quite revealing. And I'm going to just read you the summary statement for some of the findings that came out. One is the university is paying lip service to addressing equality of women and adjunct faculty. And this was after Tony had commissioned a group of senior women to work on issues related to women. But yet the focus groups, people are saying all of that is happening, but it just feels like it's only lip service. And of course I've shared all of this with Tony, Frank, and it's frustrating because there's so much work taking place, but unless you are involved with that directly, you have a different view, but that view is important because that is what people are talking about. So that was one. Another is that CSU workplace culture is one which values harmony over performance. What do you think that means? Any guesses? CSU workplace culture is one which values harmony over performance. See, I think that's great. That's not what they meant. But I wish they had meant that, yes. That's what they meant. Yeah, that there are places on campus where there may be a person who's not being a team player, but instead of reporting that person or doing anything about that, they do nothing because they value the harmony of the group as opposed to the performance of individual people. And that's an issue, right? Decentralization leads to lack of communication and sharing of ideas. There's not enough opportunity for cross-campus discussion of best practices. So again, it's that silo effect that, you know, this college is doing its thing and this college is doing its thing, or this division is doing what's important for them, but we're not communicating well across divisions and colleges. Lack of accountability. That doesn't sound good. The hiring process is out of control. And we've had long discussions about the hiring process being out of control. And then another one is training. People feeling that a lot of this could be remedied if we spent more time training supervisors, training people about diversity, training people, providing more professional development, basically. And then
the importance of going through these, and this is, so Mary, right now they're in the process, they just are wrapping up the survey that they've each designed and administered, and then doing a couple of either one focus group or some independent interviews. So being able to take what you find in those qualitative interviews and focus groups and to distill it down into really meaningful and actionable points is easier when you have 3 to 5 people that you're talking with, a little harder when we had 250 of them, but far more powerful if you can distill it down to those actionable points. So that's the part of what I wanted people to get out of this was that it's not easy, but you need to go through and pick out those larger themes that we can really build off of and make change. Because if we don't create change for improvement, then really what was the point of doing it? So it needs to be something that 3 or 5 years from now you can look back and say, we did that survey, we identified these issues, and here's what we've intended to do to mitigate them.
So we knew that early on the first survey that training was an issue, particularly for supervisors and people not understanding what diversity was and how that all worked. So one of the first things that we did was change one of the positions, one of the 2 positions we had in the office, to a director of diversity education and training. And I don't know how many of you have ever met Raya Vigil. She's our director of training, and she's fabulous. And she's doing a lot of training across campus with faculty and with staff, and we're having conversations with Blanche about how to incorporate some of this for students as well. We are very fortunate to have a strong division of student affairs because that division does a lot with students, but as we talk to faculty, they want more, and they want more in the classroom with students. And so Raya's position was created, and then we reintroduced the Faculty Institute for Inclusive Excellence, which used to be a multicultural infusion project where we're training faculty to infuse diversity in their discipline. And this was the first year. We're launching our second year, and the whole focus is on making sure that faculty, regardless of discipline, understand that you can frame it in a way that is going to be more inclusive. We have offered roundtable discussions related to navigating Fort Collins for faculty of color, navigating the tenure process because we know that that's an issue not only for faculty of color but for other faculty members, new faculty, creating an inclusive environment. that was a roundtable. Those are roundtables. It's different than creating cultural infusion. It's really what happens when you go into the classroom. What are you doing to make sure that all people feel that they are included in that classroom? The curriculum is a different issue. This one is related to what happens in the classroom. Supervisory training, what happened with this, we took it forward to the cabinet. It went clear to the cabinet, and Tony Frank said, yes, every supervisor needs to be trained. And so he's really funny the way he presents this. How many of you in cabinet feel that training for supervisors is not important? Everybody's hands go under the table, right? And so he said, well, then it needs to happen. So, make it so, number one. So supervisory training will happen, or has been happening. Diversity dialogues, we know that people need to have conversations on campus, that people having a voice is critical. It's really, really important that we create opportunities for that. There are training programs for inclusive excellence. Again, the whole notion of what does this all even mean, that we're all supposed to be creating an inclusive space. We have had training sessions for deans and cabinet members. The first one, again, thankfully Tony is really a supporter of all of this. And he said all cabinet and dean members will be there unless you are bleeding from both eyeballs. And then somebody said, well, how about one eyeball? So that first session was related to leadership role in diversity. As a leader, as a cabinet member and a dean, what is your role in terms of advancing a diversity agenda? We're having another one of these. It's an all-day retreat. It will happen November 6th. And the focus of this one is on organizational development. Okay, so you are the dean of this college. Tell us how this college is really addressing issues related to diversity. How are all of your faculty doing this? So that will happen on the 6th of November. And then bystander intervention training. Some of the issues related to harassment. If somebody sees harassment occurring, who's doing anything about it? If you walk by and you see something happen, how are you getting involved to stop it or to enlighten somebody about this? We started this process about 14 months ago. And it's gone from everything from, bystander intervention to bullying, to harassment, to then this whole notion of values. And what do we value on this campus? You're all students here. Why did you come here? Is it because of what we value? And if so, can you articulate what those values are? And why do you come to work here? What are the values that we subscribe to? What are they? Well, we found that we needed to develop those. So we have developed what we are calling principles of community. And we are now in the process of going to a whole variety of different constituent groups to share with them, these are the values that we believe define Colorado State. And when it goes to the cabinet, if it's approved, then you will be seeing those values everywhere. And it's interesting because this morning had a meeting with a group that's talking about the ethics at Colorado State. And so these values will become part of that whole process. Other things that we are doing with not just the campus climate survey, but we are also using a survey. There's a committee that comes out of the VPD office called Inclusive Physical and Virtual Campus. We know that physically and virtually we're not as inclusive as we would like to be. There are some things that are causing difficulty for those who are disabled, or just if you have international students who need a place to pray, if you have young women who are lactating, if you have all of those different issues. So this committee is trying to come up with standards. And one of the issues right now has to do with signage. And how do we convey that we have gender-inclusive bathrooms, right? The bathroom sign over here is that round sign with a symbol for women, symbol for men, and then kind of a combination. Personally, I really don't like that sign. But there are 5 different signs on campus. There's no standard for what is really appropriate. So we're working with a committee in social work to a group of students, and they have researched this, so we will be conducting a survey to find out what is the preferred signage, particularly for people who are going through the trans process.
Can I comment on that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm commenting on this because Matthew brought up the notion that on the NESI survey, we didn't allow the last time we administered the survey. You had to do, you were male or female. And I remember our first, and there's an option where we could have selected something else, but we didn't as an institution. And I remember one of the first meetings we had for our survey design was back to the gender question, because people weren't going to be providing their EADs. I don't know how long we talked about how to word that question to make sure that our wording is really inclusive. And then the frustrating part of that is unless you get to the qualitative piece of your survey and you really start talking to individuals about questions, in an analysis, anyone who doesn't answer male or female would have been discounted, because otherwise we would have been identifying them. When we just said we're not going to identify you, the N would have been so small that inadvertently we would have been identifying people. It's a very difficult conundrum between getting at what you really want to get at and protecting personal confidentiality and personal identity when numbers get very small. So as you're thinking about that, when you're in your department or you're going to survey the group of students for which you feel like your area has responsibility, remember the ends are going to be small, and people can feel like they've just been sort of put on display for everyone unless you're very, very protective over that. And part of that we can talk about later in terms of perturbing data and making sure that we're ensuring that confidentiality through statistical means instead of just excluding them like we have done in the past.
The students who are helping with this one, they decided they're going to ask for gender identity, and it's not. Usually, you see it as sex, male, female, and you don't. And so, now and again, you get other. And so they said they want to just have gender identity blank, and then everybody just fills in what they choose to fill in. But it is an issue, and see, my recollection is that we asked that question, we got 2.
We did, that's right.
Right?
So our responses back were 2 that
Two,
were not
yeah.
male or female. So certainly if we had reported on those results, we would have been losing the confidentiality piece of it. So I just want to caution that it's something we really have to be aware of, especially when you're asking sensitive questions.
But this committee, we're trying to get some signage policy together. We have a lot of new buildings coming up, this big old stadium coming up, and we really want the university to have some standard formats. And not just with signage, but a whole variety of issues related to the physical campus. And you know, unless you start looking at what's going on and what we do on campus, it's real easy for it to be invisible. I mean, we really just need to be more conscious of that. And then there's another committee that's working on some student issues, and we're trying to figure out what's causing the gaps in retention and persistence to graduation for students who are low income, first generation, and students of color. And so we will be conducting focus groups with these populations in order to find out more. Now that one you can certainly administer a survey, but we really are trying to dig a little deeper, and focus groups are, for us, the better option in that case. But those are some ways that we have used the campus climate survey to inform us about what's important for us to do, and then other activities that are kind of in the wings there. Any questions? Comments?
Earlier you mentioned
Yeah, well, essentially it has to do with our decision to have our own survey design and how we do comparisons with that, right? We decided that the comparisons we want to make are within ourselves. How are we making progress here? That it's better to over time show that in fact we are making progress, we're getting better. Let's use the harassment as an example. The first survey revealed 25%, then it's 20%. We would like to show over time that that number continues to get small, as opposed to it's 20% at Colorado State and it may be 25% in Boulder. Well, what does that tell us, right? So it's more important for us to compare ourselves with ourselves over time, is I think what we came down on that side.
Although there was feedback.
Yes, thank you.
From upper administration, really wanting to be able, our leadership wants us to improve on our campus, but also wants us to constantly be able to say we're better than institution X, or that we're better than that land grant over there. And we can't say that with the diversity, the climate efforts that we've had, because we chose to do a homegrown survey. So it has been some constructive feedback is that we should do also another survey that's nationally recognized.
And we tried that,
so
remember?
we tried that, and the response rate was like 12%. It was very small, and I'm sure not representative. The response rate for the survey that we ended up putting out was about a third, and of any faculty classified and AP was really about the same. So we had what we thought was a pretty good response rate until we went to present the results, and then faculty members said, well,
why isn't it higher?
Why are you even presenting those results? We don't even know what 70% of our employees think.
And that's a valid point.
That's a valid point. It's the other side of the same coin. We had a 30% response rate. It was pretty representative, a little over-representative in terms of females, but overall, we did the analysis to see if it was representative, and it was. But 70% of people didn't tell us what they thought. So for us, then, whenever you present the results, we had to be very cautious about not saying employees think, blah, 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 and instead say respondents reported, because we're only talking about this 30%
Right.
that said what they had to say.
Yeah, and as critical as faculty, well, others, not just faculty, can be, it's a good reminder. It really is, what we're reporting are the results of those who completed the survey. It's not really everybody. So getting more people to respond is going to be one of our challenges. We've already started having discussions about the next iteration of this, and we've talked about having the focus groups before the survey, so that the focus groups can inform us of what the issues are, and then we can then ask the questions related to what comes out of focus groups. So that's one issue. We will continue to have the discussion about asking for EID in hopes of getting more people. But all of the faculty members and others who have been critical about the response rate being low, we can also go back to them and say, you can help that by filling out the survey and encouraging your faculty members to fill out the survey. So.
Well, we could help that too, because one of the other mistakes that we realized this year was, although we had provided hard copy surveys for people to fill out if they didn't have, it seems funny now, but gosh, you sometimes just look in the mirror and think, really? Can't believe we did that. We provided the hard copy surveys and instructed employees that when they after they printed it off and filled it out, to just give it to their supervisors. They would get it to us, and people were like, "Are you kidding me? No way! I'm going to fill that out and hand it to my supervisor." So to get it to you. So we were tossing around the idea that in the future we might just have drop boxes around campus where employees can fill out a hard copy and just drop it in a Dropbox. Yeah. That way they don't have to even let their supervisor know that they filled it out.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many mistakes we're up to if we're counting, but that's one of them.
That is one. And
Another one was we didn't realize, as you're addressing different populations, that they view themselves very differently. That part of it we knew, but we did not realize that many faculty informed us that they do not have supervisors.
yes, I don't answer to anybody.
So the verbiage,
Yeah,
the verbiage was offensive to them, even
Right.
though we had no idea that that would be the case. And so, although you may not have a scenario that specific, it's a good reminder to, that's why the pilot, to be able to pilot a survey is really important if you can, because we would have gotten feedback like that before we attended all 1,045 faculty members. So.
yeah, and the supervisor one was especially important this year because we asked so many questions regarding supervision.
We were so focused on supervision this
Yeah.
year. It was
Yeah.
like half of the survey, and we got a lot of feedback
Yeah.
on that.
But even with different groups, if a person indicated that they were classified, it would move them to a separate set of questions. They're the same questions, but they were nuanced a bit. Terminology. So you might not ask for, in comparison to your colleague. Instead, you would use coworker or something like that, right? Instead of department chair. So those kinds of things, I think we're just learning more and more.
We're just learning as we go.
Yeah.
And the survey was designed with those skip-out patterns so that the employees didn't have to answer a bunch of questions
Yeah.
that were irrelevant or skip through them on their own. The survey, you design it so that if you answer yes or no here, it skips you to a different part, just to try to shorten the survey and reduce the fatigue so that
Right.
you get as valid of response as possible.
Yeah. So, thank you very much.